What's up, guys? Jeff from Texas Moto Works, and I wanted to talk about something. Somebody asked me a question recently. They said, we see you do so many vintage bikes, and with parts availability and just supply of them in mind, what do you see that hobby or business, where do you see it in 5 or 10 years? It's a good question. It got me thinking. Recently, the vintage bike community lost some important companies. Sudco went out of business, and if you don't know who Sudco is, they were the go-to for OEM parts for Japanese carburetors. And maybe you just crawled out under a rock today, but basically any vintage motorcycle you can think of is going to be carbureted. Now, there are a lot of parts available for carburetors on eBay or Amazon. Those are all, for the most part, junk. And I've learned that lesson many times. Jet kits and things like that. They're just, you're talking about tolerances that are thousandths, 10,000ths of an inch, and they're trying to replicate jets and stuff like that, and the slightest amount off is going to cause your bike to run funny. Excuse me. So Sudco was a big loss, and actually I don't know at this point what I'm going to do next time I need OEM carb parts. I have to sort that one out. I've got a couple of connections for it. But that was a big one. The other thing we lost Mac pipes. Mac made a lot of pipes for the, in fact, I've got an in-the-box brand new Mac exhaust for a GSXR 1100. They made kind of weird stuff like that, like weird exhausts for older vintage bikes. So that sucked. One is coming to, I can't think of it right now, but there was another company like that. One of those ones that related to vintage. Hopefully I'll remember it by the end of this video. Anyway, the thing that I think of is, I think vintage bikes are always going to be able to be found out there. I mean, look at 55 through 57 Chevys. You can still find them out there. Certain models more than others. So I don't really worry about that. What I do think of is, with the carburetors, I think getting parts is just going to continue to get worse and worse. And think about, with the vintage motorcycle running on carburetors, what are your options if you cannot get parts for those carburetors? I guess there's things like, well, find another set, but we're talking finite things, guys. There's only so many sets of good working carburetors out there. There's lots of sets of carburetors that need to be rebuilt, but then you get right back into that game of needing the parts to rebuild them. So that's one that that's like, out of everything, that's the one that I worry about the most, is what are we going to do about keeping carbs going? That's one thing I think of. And I always, in a perfect world, if there was a lot of demand for it, somebody would make a relatively universal or adjustable to fit fuel injection system for vintage bikes that you could adjust. You could get them in different throat sizes, and you could adjust the spacing on them to fit the different heads. But nobody's going to do that. There's not enough demand for that, for somebody to go out and do the research and make it. That would be great, but it's not going to happen. As far as the other part, I noticed one other thing that's kind of getting tough. It was tough during COVID, but some of the bikes have, the tire sizes are weird, and like 18-inch tires are starting to get, we're starting to get hard to find for certain size, for certain vintage bikes, like let's say an RD400. But other than that, like all the other peripheral stuff, I don't think it's going to be too different. They're always going to make, you know, brake pads. If it's something that we're talking about that aren't really crucial tolerances, like jets and carburetor parts and things that are metering fuel. Take, for instance, brake pads. Brake pads can be off and still fit, still work. Seat covers, grips, handlebars, things like that, brake levers. That stuff's all relatively easy. Even engine parts, for the most part, I think engine parts aren't going to be really an issue. It's just the carburetor thing. I really think is going to continue to be and get worse. And especially exotic stuff, like let's say a Honda CBX. I've had 3 CBXs. 2 of the 3 needed carburetor work, and they are not one of my favorite carburetors, put it that way. But I think the more exotic the bike, the tougher the parts are going to be to come by. So that's kind of where it's at. But I'm not stopping anytime soon. Usually before I buy a bike, I kind of check and see what the availability is, find out what the bike needs. Really don't want to get... I've had bikes that I've sold just because I've wanted to keep them, I've wanted to own them, but I just knew that if anything happened to it and I needed a part, God forbid I crashed it. Like, case in point, I had a beautiful RZ350 that I went through nut and bolt restoration on. Beautiful bike, sold it for top dollar. I would have liked to have kept that one if it was going to stay in my living room for the rest of my life, but I've got one of those now. I've got a GSXR 1100 that's a living room queen. And you know, something about having something great like that and just sitting in your living room collecting dust, it's like, eh. I had a couple of 750 turbos, same deal. They just sat, and I thought, you know, I could get good money out of these things, give them to somebody that's going to use them and enjoy them. But I don't know. So my point being, I stay away from stuff that I know has really sensitive or hard to get parts. So anyway, that's that. But leave in the comments down below, guys. Leave what you're working on. Send me a little bleep bloop, as Derek would say, about your what your project is. And if you have any questions, I'm a pretty knowledgeable guy when it comes to vintage motorcycles these days. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me anytime. Should have some new projects coming up soon. We're working on a Kawasaki Concours, a first-gen Kawasaki Concours. I've done lots and lots of those. I know them very well, and they're actually really, really good bikes. But working on that right now. Just took on a Norton Commando, which I'm kind of learning as I go. Boy, oh boy. And that's about it. I've got several bikes that are waiting to be sold. I've got a vintage, a Kawasaki Voyager that is like showroom museum condition. I've got a Cavalcade. I got the GSXR. I got a Harley. The Concours will be up for sale soon, but looking for some more projects. I'm gonna start maybe looking at doing more resto mods. I really like those, and I think with my visions, I can. I mean, you see some resto mods out there that's like, ew. One thing to me when it comes to resto mods that's like a what's the word I'm looking for? like should not ever make the mistake of doing is, if you have, let's say you have a CB900 and you're gonna, or like a CB900F, old Honda, and you're gonna resto mod it, use Honda stuff on it. You use whatever brand bike, whatever the new resto mod parts are gonna be. Make sure they match the bike. Don't put Yamaha parts on a Suzuki. It's just, it's a little thing some people probably don't notice. I notice. But anyway, so that's that. But anyway, all right guys, thanks for watching this long video. Take care.